Truth wears no mask, seeks neither place nor applause, bows to no human shrine. She only asks a hearing. A very pleasant good day to you wherever you may be, and welcome to the University of Common Sense. My name is Tim Morrow, and for the next few minutes, we're going to talk about eczema. Now, eczema is also called psoriasis, but I'm going to show you some answers to more than just eczema or psoriasis, because these simple so-called diseases are not diseases at all, but violation. But there are millions upon millions of people today suffering from what's called eczema. Eczema is not a disease. Eczema, psoriasis is not a disease. On the contrary, it's violations. It's not genetic either. Don't make that mistake. That my great-grandfather had it, my grandfather and my father, and so they passed it on down the line. If they passed it down the line, let me tell it how they passed it down the line. They passed it down the line by everybody eating the same way. To continue to do the same thing and expect different results won't happen. Psoriasis, eczema is a violation of the food that we've eaten. And in particular, it has to do with dairy products. Now, I know what you're thinking is, how in the world are you going to live in this world without using dairy products? Real easy. Don't use them. Look around and you'll find that there's no animal in all of God's kingdom that ever drinks milk again after it's weaned, except the intelligent one. Why? Because for the first 18 months of our lives, we develop in our stomach pepsin. Pepsin is to break down your mother's milk. Notice what I said? Your mother's milk. I didn't say anything about Bessie the cow. This is your mother's milk. Now, your mother may be named Bessie, but that's two different things, okay? We are only to drink our mother's milk in our lifetime, because when we get to be about 18 months old, for some of us it'll be 2 years, but by the time we get 4 teeth at the bottom and 2 teeth at the top, that is the time to stop breastfeeding the baby. Why? Because the baby will no longer be able to break down the milk. It will never be able to break down the milk. Why? Because once we get the 4 teeth at the bottom, 2 at the top, it means we've stopped producing pepsin in the stomach, and we started to produce hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid is made to break down solid food. You will never break down milk again as long as you live. Now, I didn't say you couldn't drink milk. I said you'll never break it down again as long as you live. And the proof of that is that when we drink milk, we end up with one of two things: diarrhea or constipation. Well, I gotta let you know that constipation, the surest sign of constipation is diarrhea. Why? That's the body inadvertently doing what you won't do. Once you drink milk, you become constipated with it. So the body takes water from your kidneys, runs it through the colon, and so we see it as diarrhea, but that's the body overcoming the constipation. So 2 things that you must do if you have eczema, and let me tell you something, eczema is awful. It gets to be awful in some people, and when it weeps, when it becomes scaly and it weeps, it creates a new sore on whatever it touches. And I'm telling you that there are people with eczema so bad that there is no relief day or night. The reason for that is that mucus, that is mucus coming through the skin. That's mucus, the same mucus found in your lung is coming through the skin. Why? The skin is the largest eliminative organ of the body. Since it can't get rid of through the colon, can't get rid of it through the lungs, can't get rid of it through the vaginal tract, can't get rid of it through any of the other channels of elimination. It goes through the skin. The skin is the largest eliminative organ of the body. And that's what psoriasis is. It comes from white rice, white sugar, pastas, pizzas, spaghetti, macaroni, cheese, and in particular, cheese. Today, there's more eczema than there ever has been. You know why? Because we are eating more cheese than we have ever eaten. It kind of amazed me the other day when I was listening to a stock market report. And on the stock market report, the Kraft people sold their candy division. Do you know why they sold their candy division? They said, we want to concentrate more on cheese. Why? Because that's what people are going to. Got any ideas as to why? Let me tell you one of the reasons. Because people are saying, well, I've become a vegetarian. I don't eat meat anymore. So people say to them, well, where do you get your protein from? Cheese. Let me tell you something. You'd be better off to go back to the meat, because the cheese is an absolute enemy. You can't even hardly swallow the cheese. You realize that? You can't even hardly swallow the cheese. It's so thick that you can't even hardly swallow it. And just think, folks, when that happens to you, that cheese shows up on your teeth, and you have to go to the dentist and have him pluck it off with a steel knife to get it off of you. Well, remember, you swallow it. And once you swallow it, the same thing happens inside that happened to your teeth. However, you don't have anybody that goes inside and picks it off. It clogs up the arteries, the veins. It makes it so that we don't see as good. It makes it so that our lymphatic system don't work. When our lymphatic system fills up with this cheese and white rice, and guess what they call it? HIV positive, or even AIDS. But the bottom line is, what they call eczema and psoriasis is not a disease, it is violation, and we did it with processed food. That means the food that you ate had no nutrition in it, and all you did was ate all this nutritionalist food. The food can't get out because it's too thick, and it sticks to every part of the body. When our spleen stops working, they got a name for it. When the kidneys stop working, they got a name for it. On and on and on it goes. But all it is just names. In fact, I decided to bring a book with me because I wanted to name off a few items that they call all these different diseases and different names. And remember, when they name something, they can sell you a remedy. Remember that. When we go to the doctor, what do we go for? We go for a cure. We know the doctor don't cure nothing. We go so the doctor can say what you have. They got all kinds of names, and I want to read a few of these. I want to read a few of these names. Now remember, what we call mucus is also called phlegm. It's also called catarrh. The old men of the days used to call it catarrh. They called it catarrh. It's phlegm, catarrh, or mucus. Well, I want to read to you about catarrh so that you can get an idea of what your so-called disease is. Did you hear me say I said so-called? Because all of this, all that I'm going to read you is exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. It's just showing up in a different place in the body. They rename it so they can save face and sell you a new remedy. Listen to me. Remember, I said that this is called catarrh, which is phlegm, which is mucus. Catarrh of the stomach is called, you've heard it before, gastritis. Catarrh of the mouth is called stomitis. Catarrh of the throat is called diphtheria. Did you ever hear that word before? They give you diphtheria shots. You know what those diphtheria shots do? They dry up the very mucus that should be coming out of. They dry it up and leave it in you. And 40 years after you originally put in it, you may have put in when you were 3 years old, and at 45, it affects you again. And they'll go in there and cut something out to overcome the awful thing that they've done to you. But listen to it. A catarrh of the nose is called rhinitis. Catarrh of the bronchioles is called bronchitis. I mean, you hear these things, all that. All these are the same thing. Doesn't make any difference that it's coming from a different part of the body. But when we look at it, when we hear it, it's called something different. They can sell you a remedy, but all of it is the results of white rice, white sugar, pastas, pizzas, meat, spaghetti, macaroni, cheese, and it's not limited to that. It's not limited to those things that I'm saying. But catarrh of the lungs is called pulmonus, influenza, pneumonia, or consumption. Same dirty words, the same dirty mucus. Catarrh of the eyes, conjunctivitis. Want to know what your so-called disease is? That's mucus coming out. That's the reason why you can wake up in the morning with your eyes glued together from the mucus, because the mucus is trying to come out. It stops our thought process. It stops everything. It causes our eyes to be red because mucus is acid. Acid burns. And the proof of that is when that acid comes through the skin, and they call it eczema or psoriasis, it truly burns. Wake up, America. Wake up and realize that all these things that they name is only to make money, to sell you a new drug. A catarrh of the ears is called otitis. You ever heard that one before? Catarrh of the brain is called meningitis. You ever heard that one before? You can go crazy with that one. Catarrh of the small intestines is called enteritis. Catarrh of the large intestine is called colitis. You ever hear that one before? Catarrh of the appendix, appendicitis. Catarrh of the liver is hepatitis. All of these are the same exact thing. I don't mean that they're close. They are exactly the same thing. Why does it affect one part of one person's body and the other part of another person's body? Why? Because it will go to the place that is the weakest. Wherever the body will hold it, that's where it will stay. But with eczema and psoriasis, it means it's spread it out much over all the body. You know what people want to know? If that's so, how come a baby is born with it? Good question. I'm glad you asked. I want to explain why. Because the baby is no more than its mom or its dad. And all the mucus that was in the dad and all the mucus that's in the mom shows up in the baby. Why? Because we're never more than our mother and father at birth. Whatever they did, we got it. The bad seed meets the bad egg, bad pregnancy, and on it goes. And as soon as the baby is born, they start at that minute to absolutely destroy that baby. 1-month-old shots and all that stuff. Come on, folks. Come on. Let's look at another one here. Catarrh of the pancreas, pancreatitis. Catarrh of the kidneys is called nephritis, Bright's disease. Catarrh of the vaginal tract is vaginitis. Catarrh of the uterus, metritis. Catarrh of the ovaries, ovitis. Catarrh of the bladder, cystitis. Catarrh of the prostate, prostatitis. On and on and on the story goes, folks. It is still the result of the white rice, the white sugar, the pastas, the pizza, the meat, spaghetti, macaroni, and cheese. If you have psoriasis, if you have eczema, you have psoriasis, you must immediately quit all dairy products. That's the number one thing you want to do. Because white bread and white rice joins the glue from the milk, no matter what you call it. That includes the wonderful yogurt that you all think that is the nice thing, and the butter, and the milk, and the 2% milk, and the 1% milk, and the skim milk, and the low-fat milk. That's not what you want to look for. This is what you want to look for. You want to look for the word pasteurized. because pasteurized is where the absolute danger is. Wouldn't you like to know why they pasteurize milk? Because they love you and they don't want to see no germs get in you? That ain't why they did it, folks. They did it because living milk, when you milk that cow, that milk immediately starts to turn into clabber. In other words, it starts to sour. In the old days, they used to go on the train. They used to go by train. Milk was carried by train. When the milk got where it was going, it was spoiled. That means it was clabbered now, and they couldn't sell it as sweet milk. So what they did the same thing to the milk that they did to wheat. Okay? They made it so that they could strip all the life out of the milk, all the life out of the wheat, strip it all out, and feed you the residue. And that's what you get when you get milk. That means the milk will no longer spoil, because that milk, that spoiled milk, represents a big monetary loss, and the money people were not going for that kind of loss. So pasteurization means the milk is dead. They stripped all the life out of it, and now they're feeding you the residue. You know what they did with the life? They fed it to the pig so that they could make the pig fat fast and they could sell you the pig. It's all done for the almighty dollar, and that's the reason why I'm here, is because there are some people who are interested in their own health. They're not interested in the money. They're not interested in being millionaires. They're interested in being well. And that's where the real millionaire is when you are well. Because when you're well, you can do anything that you want. When you're sick, all you can think about is your illness. Rockefeller, the original Rockefeller, said he'd give every dime he had to eat one decent meal. Here was a guy that ate pills until he was dead. All he wanted was one decent meal. He'd trade all his money for one decent meal. There are people out there that want to be well, and that's what this is about, is teaching people how to overcome what is happening to them, because it is happening to them out of ignorance. And if we don't change, you know what we got to look forward to? Another generation of this inexcusable ignorance. And that's the reason why we're here. That's the reason why we want to know eczema and psoriasis are not diseases. They are violations, and they can happen very early on in your life. That's the reason why it'll show up at joints, places like the elbow and inside of the elbow and the elbow, or places where we move. Why? Because the waste of processed food is always looking for a way out of the body. It knows that it's waste and that it belongs out of the body. But 98% of all Americans are constipated, so it can't go through the bowel. The lungs are loaded. The lungs are filled with mucus. I mean, so bad is our lungs with mucus that at the end of our lives, guess what? We drown in our own mucus. We literally drown from the mucus that's in the lungs spilling over into the windpipe, and we drown in our own mucus. Folks, that's how 85% of us will die in our lifetime. Will die from the waste of processed food. And let me tell you something. There is a waste that comes from cheese making. When they make cheese, there is a waste that comes from it. And it's so thick and so heavy. In fact, it's 60 times thicker than cheese. Can you even imagine that? Here's a waste that comes from making cheese that's 60 times thicker than cheese is. Well, in the North Country here in this country, Wisconsin, where they make cheese, there are mountains. There's mountains of this at the farmer, at the dairy where they milk the cows. There's mountains of this stuff. Yeah, I know you've driven along the highways there and thought there was mountains, but let me tell you, there are no mountains in that part of the country. That is waste from making cheese. When they make that waste, they have had to try and find a place to put the waste. They can't put it in the ground because it affects the underground supply of water. Believe it or not, about 70% of the water we drink comes from underground. And so they can't put it in the ground, so because it affects the underground supply of water. They can't put it in the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes are ruined. In fact, did you know that the Great Lakes is the greatest supply of fresh water on earth? It's the greatest supply of fresh water on earth. It is so polluted now that it won't even support most of the fish life. So that is what's going on. They can't put it in the Great Lakes anymore. That'll stop the Great Lakes from even flowing at all. So the government financed the study to find out what in the world are we going to do with all this waste. Well, let me tell you something. They used to pay the farmers a penny a pound to take that waste and feed it to their pigs. Now they charge the farmer, and there is such a big demand for this waste, which they call WHEY. Whey. You'll see it on everything. It's on all the pancake mixes, all the cake mixes, even this bodybuilding stuff. It's 100% this waste, this throwaway that they call whey. It is absolute waste, and they sell it for incredible prices. They have found a way to feed us the waste that we wouldn't eat at one time. And now here we are, we're eating, and we call it whey, because whey literally meant something good at one time. But whey today is the worst stuff that you eat, because you get the penicillin from the animal and you get the steroids from the animal. So we're big in this country because of the whey and because of the penicillin and because of the steroid. And we're wondering, what in the world is the matter with us? Why are we getting bigger? We're getting so big now that have you noticed that they changed the chart that used to have for our weight? Because so many of us are big, they've changed that. Well, folks, this is the very thing that causes eczema and psoriasis. That's the reason why I say to you, wake up, because they got more of it to feed us. If you want to be well, that means you must make some effort on your own to get well. See, I came from the prostate cancer field. 5 years of doctors, drugs, and treatment, and I woke up one morning to realize, hey, I've got to take care of myself totally. And I learned how to take care of myself. All of a sudden, it's been 22 years ago since they discovered that I had prostate cancer. And I have gotten well simply because I took responsibility for my own health. And I say to you over and over again, if you are suffering with eczema, psoriasis, all those other diseases, because dandruff, athlete's foot, all those things is the same waste showing up in a different place in the body. Our first interest is to watch people get well. That's number one. It's the most important thing that we do. Why? Because well people totally act different and do things differently. So I say to you, and I say to you over and over again, growing old does not make us sick. It is growing sick that makes us old. For the University of Common Sense, I'm Tim Morrow. And you'll see us next time.